Good evening, everyone. Welcome to what promises to be an extraordinary journey through one of humanity's most fascinating ancient narratives. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Drop a comment below and let me know your location and local time. It's amazing to think that we're all gathered here across continents and time zones to explore this ancient mystery together. Let us begin at the very beginning, in the misty legends of ancient Italy, where the story of Rome first takes shape. According to tradition, the city of Rome was founded on April 21st in the year 753 BCE, though, of course, the true origins are far more gradual and complex than any single date might suggest. The legend tells us of twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, born to the Vestal Virgin Rhea Silvia and the god Mars. Their great-uncle, the usurper king Aurelius, feared these boys and ordered them cast into the Tiber River. But the river god took pity, and the cradle carrying the twins washed ashore near the Palatine Hill. There, a she-wolf found the infants and nursed them. A woodpecker brought them food. Eventually, a shepherd named Faustulus discovered the boys and raised them as his own. When the twins grew to manhood and learned their true heritage, they overthrew Amulius and restored their grandfather Numitor to the throne of Alba Longa. The brothers then decided to found a new city near the place where the she-wolf had saved them, but they quarreled over which hill to build upon and who would rule. Romulus favored the Palatine Hill, while Remus preferred the Aventine. They agreed to let the gods decide through augury, watching for signs in the flight of birds. Remus claimed to have seen 6 vultures first, but then Romulus saw 12. In the dispute that followed, Romulus killed his brother and became the sole founder and first king of Rome. He gave the city his name, and thus Rome was born in fratricide, a dark beginning that would echo through its history. But of course, archaeology tells a different story. The area of Rome was inhabited by various tribes for centuries before 753 BCE. The site was attractive because of its position on the Tiber River at the first convenient crossing point inland from the sea, and because of the 7 hills that provided natural defensive positions. Small villages on these hills gradually merged into a single community, a process that probably occurred around the 8th century BCE, making the traditional founding date not entirely wrong. Rome, in its earliest form, was ruled by kings. Tradition names 7 kings who ruled from 753 to 509 BCE, though again, the historical reality was likely more complex than any single date might suggest. These kings were not hereditary monarchs, but were supposedly elected by the Senate and acclaimed by the people. After Romulus came Numa Pompilius, a peaceful king known for establishing Rome's religious institutions and calendar. He supposedly received divine wisdom from the nymph Egeria in a sacred grove. Then came Tullus Hostilius, a warlike king who destroyed Alba Longa, Rome's mother city, and forcibly relocated its population to Rome. Ancus Marcius followed, conquering Latin settlements and founding Rome's port at Ostia.
The last 3 kings were Etruscan, reflecting the influence of the powerful Etruscan civilization to the north. Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, the 5th king, came to Rome from Etruria and undertook grand building projects, including the first version of the great sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, and the Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill. His successor, Servius Tullius, reformed the Roman constitution and greatly expanded the city, building walls that enclosed all 7 hills. The 7th and final king was Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, whose tyranny and arrogance would lead to the end of the monarchy. The breaking point came when his son, Sextus Tarquinius, raped Lucretia, the wife of a Roman nobleman. Lucretia summoned her male relatives, told them what had happened, and demanded they avenge her honor. Then she took her own life. This tragedy sparked a rebellion led by Lucius Junius Brutus. The Tarquins were expelled from Rome in 509 BCE, and the Romans vowed never again to be ruled by kings. The Republic was born. The Roman Republic was founded on the principle that power should not rest in the hands of one man. Instead, 2 consuls were elected each year to lead the state, each able to veto the other. The Senate, a council of elder statesmen from prominent families, provided continuity and advice. Various assemblies allowed citizens to vote on laws and elect magistrates. But the early republic was far from peaceful or stable. Rome was surrounded by hostile neighbors and had to fight constantly for survival. The Etruscans attempted to restore the Tarquins by force. The Latin cities to the south viewed Rome's growing power with alarm. The Sabines, Equi, and Volsci raided Roman territory regularly. Within Rome itself, there was bitter conflict between the patricians, the old aristocratic families, and the plebeians, the common citizens. The plebeians had little political power and could not marry patricians. They could be enslaved for debt. When the state needed plebeian soldiers to fight its wars, the plebeians began to demand rights. In 494 BCE, the plebeians staged what might be considered one of history's first general strikes. They withdrew from the city to the Sacred Mount and refused to return until their demands were met. The patricians, needing the plebeians to defend Rome, agreed to create tribunes of the plebs, officials who could veto actions harmful to plebeian interests and whose persons were sacrosanct. This was just the beginning of the conflict of the orders, as it's called, which would last 2 centuries. Step by step, the plebeians won concessions. In 450 BCE, the laws were written down in the 12 tables so that patrician magistrates could not arbitrarily interpret customary law. Plebeians gradually gained the right to hold various offices, including the consulship in 366 BCE. In 287 BCE, laws passed by the plebeian assembly became binding on all Romans without needing Senate approval. Through this long struggle, Rome developed its unique political culture, where rights were won through organized resistance rather than revolution, and where precedent and law became paramount. While managing internal conflicts, Rome was steadily expanding its power throughout Italy. This was not a coordinated plan of conquest, but rather a gradual process driven by the need for security and the ambitions of individual commanders. Rome's approach to expansion was pragmatic and flexible. Some defeated peoples were incorporated as full citizens. Others became allies with various degrees of autonomy, but obligated to provide troops for Roman armies. Some communities received Latin rights, a middle status between full citizenship and allied status. Rome also founded colonies of Roman citizens in strategic locations throughout Italy, spreading Roman power. In the 390s BCE, Rome suffered a catastrophic setback when Gallic warriors swept down from the north, defeated the Roman army at the Battle of the Allia, and sacked the city itself. According to legend, only the Capitol Hill held out, saved when the sacred geese of Juno alerted the defenders to a night attack. The Gauls eventually withdrew after receiving a ransom, but the humiliation burned in Roman memory. The city was rebuilt with stronger walls, and Rome became more militaristic and determined. By the 4th century BCE, Rome had subdued or allied with most of Latium and was pushing into Samnium, the mountainous region to the southeast. The Samnite Wars, fought intermittently from 343 to 290 BCE, were brutal conflicts. The Samnites were fierce warriors fighting on their own rugged terrain. At the Battle of the Caudine Forks in 321 BCE, the Samnites trapped a Roman army in a narrow pass and forced them to pass under a yoke of spears in humiliating surrender. But Rome persevered, learned from defeats, and ultimately prevailed. By 290 BCE, Rome dominated central Italy. The Greek cities of southern Italy, wealthy and cultured, viewed this rough Latin city with alarm. In 280 BCE, Tarentum, the greatest Greek city in Italy, invited King Pyrrhus of Epirus to defend them. Pyrrhus was one of the great generals of the age, a skilled tactician who used Hellenistic-style phalanx formations and war elephants. He won victories at Heraclea in 280 BCE and Asculum in 279 BCE, but at such cost in casualties that he allegedly remarked, "One more such victory and I am lost," giving us the phrase Pyrrhic victory. The Romans, though defeated, immediately raised new armies and continued fighting. Pyrrhus, unable to achieve decisive victory and facing problems back home, eventually withdrew from Italy. By 270 BCE, Rome controlled all of Italy south of the Po Valley. With Italy secured, Rome now faced a rival for control of the western Mediterranean, Carthage, a wealthy Phoenician city-state in North Africa with extensive commercial interests and a powerful navy.
The First Punic War began in 264 BCE over control of Sicily. It would last 23 years, making it the longest continuous war in ancient history. Rome, a land power, had to build a navy to challenge Carthage's maritime supremacy. The Romans were not natural sailors, but they were determined and innovative. They developed the corvus, a boarding bridge that allowed Roman soldiers to turn naval battles into land battles fought on ships' decks. The war dragged on with victories and defeats on both sides. Both states were pushed to the brink of exhaustion, their treasuries drained, their manpower depleted. In 241 BCE, Rome finally won a decisive naval victory at the Aegean Islands, and Carthage sued for peace, ceding Sicily to Rome. Sicily became Rome's first province, a territory governed not as an ally, but as subject territory, paying tribute to Rome. But the peace would not last. Carthage, led by the Barca family, rebuilt its power by conquering territory in Spain. Hamilcar Barca, the greatest Carthaginian general of the First Punic War, made his young son Hannibal swear eternal enmity to Rome. In 218 BCE, Hannibal launched one of the most audacious military campaigns in history. Rather than await Rome's attack, he marched an army of 50,000 soldiers, 9,000 cavalry, and 37 war elephants from Spain through southern Gaul and over the Alps into Italy. The crossing was nightmarish. Alpine tribes attacked the column. Snow, ice, and rock slides killed thousands. Most of the elephants perished, but Hannibal reached Italy with an army still capable of fighting. For the next 15 years, Hannibal ravaged Italy. At the Trebia River, Lake Trasimene, and most catastrophically at Cannae in 216 BCE, Hannibal destroyed Roman armies. At Cannae, through brilliant tactical encirclement, Hannibal's smaller force killed an estimated 50,000 to 70,000 Romans in a single day, the worst military defeat Rome would ever suffer. Rome's situation seemed hopeless. Many Italian allies defected to Hannibal. Some urged surrender, but Rome refused to give up. The Senate declared that the word peace was forbidden. Rome adopted a strategy of attrition, avoiding major battles, harassing Hannibal's foraging parties, and slowly grinding down his army. Meanwhile, Rome struck at Carthage's Spanish territories, where a young general named Publius Cornelius Scipio won stunning victories. By 203 BCE, Scipio had conquered Carthage's Spanish Empire and was ready to invade Africa itself. Hannibal was recalled to defend Carthage. In 202 BCE, at the Battle of Zama, Scipio defeated Hannibal, ending the Second Punic War. Carthage was stripped of its overseas territories, its navy, and its independence in foreign affairs. Rome was now the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean. But there would be a third Punic War. A faction in Rome, led by the senator Cato the Elder, who ended each speech with "Carthage must be destroyed," argued that Carthage, even weakened, remained a threat. In 149 BCE, Rome manufactured a pretext for war. Despite heroic resistance, Carthage was besieged, captured in 146 BCE, its people killed or enslaved, and the city utterly destroyed. According to legend, the Romans plowed salt into the ground so nothing would grow there, though this may be apocryphal.
While fighting Carthage, Rome was also expanding eastward into the Hellenistic world, the kingdoms that had emerged from Alexander the Great's empire. Rome's involvement began almost reluctantly. The Greek cities asked for Roman protection against various Hellenistic kings. Roman armies defeated Philip V of Macedon in the Second Macedonian War, ending in 197 BCE. The Roman commander, Flaminius, dramatically announced at the Isthmian Games that all Greek cities were free, a declaration met with ecstatic joy by the Greeks. But this freedom was illusory. Rome expected gratitude and obedience. When Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire invaded Greece, Rome defeated him in the Syrian War. Rome then crushed Perseus of Macedon in the Third Macedonian War, ending in 168 BCE at the Battle of Pydna. After yet another Macedonian uprising, Rome finally converted Macedonia into a province in 148 BCE. The Greeks, chafing under Roman domination, rebelled in the Achaean War. Rome's response was brutal. In 146 BCE, the same year Carthage fell, the Roman general Mummius sacked Corinth, one of Greece's greatest cities, as a lesson to others. Rome had now become an imperial power, controlling vast territories from Spain to Greece, from North Africa to the edges of Asia Minor. Roman governors ruled the provinces, often enriching themselves through corruption and exploitation. Wealth flowed into Rome, transforming the simple agricultural city into a cosmopolitan metropolis. But this rapid expansion created profound problems that would ultimately destroy the Republic. The small farmers who had been the backbone of Roman military strength were being ruined. Military service kept them from their farms for years at a time. Meanwhile, wealthy senators were accumulating vast estates worked by the massive influx of war captives enslaved in Rome's conquests. These latifundia, as the great estates were called, produced grain and other crops more efficiently than small farms could. Dispossessed farmers drifted to Rome, joining a growing urban mob of landless poor dependent on state grain distributions. In 133 BCE, a tribune named Tiberius Gracchus proposed redistributing public land to poor citizens. This was not particularly radical. The land in question was public property being illegally occupied by the wealthy, but it threatened powerful interests. When Tiberius sought an unconstitutional second tribunate to protect his reforms, a mob of senators and their supporters beat him to death with clubs and chair legs. His body was thrown into the Tiber. 10 years later, Tiberius's brother Gaius Gracchus pursued even more ambitious reforms, including subsidized grain for the urban poor and extending citizenship to Italian allies. He too was killed in political violence, along with 3,000 of his supporters. The Gracchi's murders marked a turning point. Political conflict was no longer resolved through debate and compromise, but through violence. The Republic's norms and institutions were breaking down. Meanwhile, military commanders were becoming dangerously powerful. Gaius Marius, a gifted general from an undistinguished family, won glory fighting in North Africa and defending Italy from Germanic invasions. He also transformed the Roman army, recruiting landless volunteers who were loyal to their general rather than the state, expecting their commander to reward them with land and plunder. Sulla, another brilliant general from an aristocratic family, became Marius's rival.
In 88 BCE, when the Senate gave Sulla command of a war against Mithridates VI of Pontus, but the popular assembly gave it to Marius instead, Sulla did the unthinkable. He marched his legions on Rome itself. It was the first time Roman soldiers had attacked their own city. Sulla purged his enemies, then left to fight Mithridates. While Sulla was away, Marius returned, seized Rome, and massacred Sulla's supporters. When Sulla returned victorious from the east in 83 BCE, he marched on Rome again, defeated Marius's forces, and instituted proscriptions, posting lists of enemies who could be killed on sight, their property confiscated. Thousands died. Sulla made himself dictator and attempted to restore senatorial authority through constitutional reforms, but the precedent of military force resolving political disputes had been set. Sulla retired in 79 BCE and died the next year. The next generation would see even greater chaos. 3 men would come to dominate. Pompey the Great earned his cognomen through victories in the east, clearing the Mediterranean of pirates and conquering vast territories in Asia Minor and Syria. Crassus was Rome's richest man, who had made his fortune in prescriptions and property speculation. Caesar was a brilliant, ambitious politician from an old but impoverished patrician family. In 60 BCE, these 3 formed an unofficial alliance, the First Triumvirate, to dominate Roman politics. Caesar secured the consulship for 59 BCE and then a 5-year command in Gaul. Over the next 9 years, from 58 to 50 BCE, Caesar conquered all of Gaul, roughly modern France, Belgium, and parts of Germany, crossed the Rhine to raid Germanic tribes, and even invaded Britain twice. He recorded his campaigns in his Commentaries on the Gallic War, a masterpiece of Latin prose that justified his actions while making him famous throughout Rome. But Caesar's success alarmed the Senate and Pompey. Crassus had been killed fighting the Parthians in 53 BCE. Without him to mediate, Caesar and Pompey drifted toward conflict. The Senate, manipulated by Caesar's enemies, ordered him to disband his army and return to Rome. Caesar knew that without his army, his enemies would prosecute him and end his political career. On January 10th, 49 BCE, Caesar made his decision. With a single legion, he crossed the Rubicon River, the boundary between his province and Italy proper. "The die is cast," he reportedly said. To cross with an army was treason, an act of war against the Republic. But Caesar gambled that his enemies were unprepared and that he could win. Civil war erupted. Pompey and the Senate fled to Greece to raise armies from the eastern provinces. Caesar, moving with characteristic speed, secured Italy and Spain, then pursued Pompey east. In 48 BCE, at Pharsalus in Greece, Caesar defeated Pompey's larger army. Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was murdered by courtiers hoping to win Caesar's favor. Caesar spent time in Egypt, becoming involved with Queen Cleopatra VII, who bore him a son. Then he campaigned in Asia Minor, where after a swift victory, he sent the famous message, Veni, Vidi, Vici, I came, I saw, I conquered. He defeated the last Pompeian forces in North Africa and Spain. By 45 BCE, Caesar had won the civil war. He was voted dictator for life. He enacted reforms, expanding the Senate, settling veterans in colonies, reforming the calendar. The Julian calendar would be used for centuries, planning public works. But many senators, both his enemies and some former allies, feared he would make himself king. On March 14th, 44 BCE, the Ides of March, Caesar entered the Senate. A group of conspirators, led by Brutus and Cassius, surrounded him and stabbed him 23 times. He died at the base of a statue of Pompey. Caesar's assassination did not save the Republic. It plunged Rome into another series of civil wars. Caesar's lieutenant, Antony, and his grandnephew and adopted son, Octavian, hunted down the conspirators. At Philippi in 42 BCE, Brutus and Cassius were defeated and committed suicide. But Antony and Octavian soon fell out, especially after Antony formed an alliance with Cleopatra in Egypt. Octavian portrayed Antony as bewitched by an Eastern queen, planning to make Alexandria, not Rome, the capital. In 31 BCE, at the naval battle of Actium off Greece's western coast, Octavian's forces defeated Antony and Cleopatra. The couple fled to Egypt, and the following year, suicide as Octavian's forces approached. Cleopatra died from the bite of an asp, according to legend. Egypt became a Roman province. Octavian returned to Rome in 29 BCE as sole master of the Roman world. He was only 33 years old. The question was what to do with all this power. The Romans had murdered Caesar for appearing too kingly. They had fought civil wars for generations over who should rule. Octavian's solution was brilliant. He claimed to restore the Republic while actually creating a monarchy. In 27 BCE, Octavian offered to resign all his powers and return control to the Senate. The Senate, filled with his supporters and understanding this was theater, begged him to continue serving the state. They granted him a large province containing most of the legions, control over foreign policy, and awarded him the title Augustus, meaning the revered one. He kept the office of tribune, giving him the power to veto any action and making his person sacrosanct. He held power not through a single official title, but through an accumulation of powers, and crucially, through command of the military and the loyalty of the legions.
Augustus claimed to be merely the first citizen, princeps, serving the restored republic, but everyone knew he was the ruler. The republic was dead, though its forms persisted. The Principate had begun, the period when Rome was ruled by emperors pretending to be republican magistrates. Augustus ruled for 40 years, dying in 14 CE at age 75. His reign brought peace and stability after a century of civil strife. The doors of the Temple of Janus, which stood open in times of war and closed in times of peace, were closed for only the third time in Roman history. Augustus reformed the administration of the empire, creating a bureaucracy to govern provinces efficiently. He reorganized the army into a standing professional force with fixed terms of service and veterans' benefits. He stationed legions permanently on the frontiers, particularly along the Rhine and Danube rivers. He established the Praetorian Guard, an elite unit stationed in Rome to protect the emperor. He patronized the arts and literature, presiding over what would be called the Golden Age of Latin literature. The poets Virgil, Horace, and Ovid flourished during his reign. Virgil wrote the Aeneid, an epic poem linking Rome's destiny to the Trojan hero Aeneas, providing Rome with a mythical pedigree to rival Greece. Ovid wrote the Metamorphoses and works of love poetry, though he would later be exiled for mysterious offenses. Augustus rebuilt Rome extensively. He claimed to have found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. Temples, basilicas, theaters, forums, and other public buildings transformed the urban landscape. He also attempted moral reforms, trying to restore traditional Roman virtues. Laws encouraged marriage and childbearing among the upper classes, punished adultery, and restricted extravagant displays. These moral laws were widely evaded, and Augustus himself had to exile his own daughter Julia for adultery, a personal tragedy that haunted him. Augustus's great failure was in Germany. He sought to expand the empire's frontier from the Rhine to the Elbe River. In 9 CE, 3 legions under Publius Quintilius Varus were ambushed and destroyed in the Teutoburg forest by Germanic tribes led by Arminius. Varus committed suicide. The loss was catastrophic. Augustus supposedly wandered his palace, crying out, "Varus, give me back my legions!" Rome abandoned plans to conquer Germany, and the Rhine remained the frontier. Augustus struggled with succession. He had no sons. His chosen heirs kept dying. Finally, he settled on his stepson, Tiberius, a capable general whom Augustus personally disliked. When Augustus died in 14 CE, Tiberius succeeded smoothly, establishing the principle of imperial succession. Tiberius ruled competently, but grew increasingly bitter and paranoid. He retired to the island of Capri in 26 CE, governing through letters and leaving Rome in the hands of subordinates, particularly Sejanus, the prefect of the Praetorian Guard, who used treason trials to eliminate rivals. After Sejanus's fall, Tiberius's reign became a nightmare of suspicion and executions. He died in 37 CE, unmourned. Tiberius's great-nephew Caligula succeeded amid public rejoicing. Young, handsome, and charming, Caligula was initially popular, but within a year he fell seriously ill, and when he recovered, his behavior changed dramatically. He became cruel, erratic, and megalomaniacal, demanding to be worshipped as a god. He appointed his horse as a consul, or so the stories claim. He planned to move the capital to Egypt. Whether he was genuinely insane or simply a capricious tyrant is debated. In 41 CE, Praetorian guards assassinated him. The Praetorians then found Claudius, Caligula's uncle, hiding behind a curtain and proclaimed him emperor. Claudius was considered a fool because of physical disabilities and a stammer, but he proved an effective administrator. He conquered Britain, adding the province that Caesar had merely raided. He improved Rome's water supply and harbor facilities. He was betrayed by his wives. Messalina was executed for plotting against him, and his final wife, Agrippina, probably poisoned him in 54 CE to place her son Nero on the throne. Nero began well, guided by wise advisors, including the philosopher Seneca, but he grew increasingly tyrannical and self-indulgent. He fancied himself an artist and forced senators to attend his poetry recitals and theatrical performances. He murdered his mother Agrippina, his wife Octavia, and many others. In 64 CE, a great fire devastated Rome. Nero probably didn't fiddle while Rome burned. The fiddle didn't exist yet, and he probably wasn't in Rome when the fire started, but he took advantage of the devastation to build his golden house, an enormous palace complex. Rumors blamed Nero for the fire. To deflect suspicion, Nero blamed the Christians, a small, obscure sect. Christians were arrested and executed in brutal spectacles, including being burned alive as human torches. This was the first imperial persecution of Christians. Nero grew increasingly paranoid, executing senators and generals on thin pretexts. In 68 CE, military commanders rebelled. The Senate declared Nero a public enemy. He fled Rome and committed suicide with his secretary's help, reportedly lamenting, "What an artist dies in me." Nero's death without heir triggered civil war. In 69 CE, the year of 4 emperors, generals Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and Vespasian successively claimed the throne, each backed by different legions. The empire nearly fractured. Finally, Vespasian, a competent general from an undistinguished family, emerged victorious. Vespasian, founder of the Flavian dynasty, restored order and discipline. He was practical, unpretentious, and had a sense of humor. His dying words were allegedly, "Oh dear, I think I'm becoming a god," mocking the tradition of deifying dead emperors. He rebuilt Rome's finances and began construction of the Colosseum, properly called the Flavian Amphitheater.
His son, Titus, completed the Colosseum, but his reign was brief, marred by disasters, including the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE, which buried Pompeii and Herculaneum. Titus died after only 2 years, beloved by the people. His brother, Domitian, ruled autocratically for 15 years. Competent in administration and military matters, he was nonetheless deeply unpopular with the Senate, which he treated with contempt. He was assassinated in 96 CE in a palace conspiracy. The Senate then chose Nerva, an elderly senator, as emperor. Nerva established a new principle. He adopted the ablest man available as his son and successor. This system of adoptive succession would give Rome nearly a century of capable rulers. Nerva ruled briefly, adopting Trajan as his heir. Trajan, a general from Spain, was the first emperor born outside Italy. His reign from 98 to 117 CE was marked by military expansion. He conquered Dacia, modern Romania, whose gold mines enriched Rome. He campaigned against the Parthian Empire, briefly annexing Armenia and Mesopotamia and reaching the Persian Gulf, Rome's greatest territorial extent. Trajan was beloved for his accessibility and building projects, including Trajan's Column, which still stands in Rome, depicting his Dacian wars. He was granted the title Optimus Princeps, the best ruler. The Senate would honor later emperors with the wish that they be luckier than Augustus and better than Trajan. Trajan's successor, Hadrian, ruling from 117 to 138 CE, was a contrast. Where Trajan expanded, Hadrian consolidated. He withdrew from Trajan's eastern conquests and focused on strengthening frontiers. In Britain, he built Hadrian's Wall, stretching coast to coast across northern England. He traveled throughout the empire, personally inspecting provinces and troops. Hadrian was cultured and intellectual, a Philhellene who wore a Greek-style beard. He had a passionate relationship with a young man named Antinous, who drowned in the Nile under mysterious circumstances. Hadrian deified Antinous and founded a city, Antinoopolis, in his memory, an unusual display of personal grief. Antoninus Pius ruled peacefully from 138 to 161 CE, maintaining prosperity without major wars. His reign was so peaceful that historians have little to say about it, which is perhaps the highest compliment. He was succeeded by Marcus Aurelius, known as the Philosopher Emperor. Marcus Aurelius ruled from 161 to 180 CE during increasingly difficult times. Germanic tribes pressed on the northern frontiers. A devastating plague, possibly smallpox, swept through the empire. Parthia made trouble in the east. Marcus spent much of his reign in military camps on the Danube frontier, fighting the Marcomanni and other tribes. Despite these pressures, he found time to write his Meditations, philosophical reflections in Greek based on Stoic philosophy, never intended for publication, but preserved as a profound spiritual work. Marcus Aurelius made one critical error. He broke the adoptive succession pattern and named his biological son, Commodus, as his heir. It was an understandable choice, a father wanting his son to succeed, but it would have disastrous consequences. Commodus, ruling from 180 to 192 CE, was vain, cruel, and unstable. He saw himself as the reincarnation of Hercules and fought in the Colosseum as a gladiator, an appalling spectacle to Roman sensibilities. He renamed Rome Colonia Commodiana after himself. His reign dissolved into misrule and paranoia until he was strangled by a wrestler in a conspiracy in 92 CE. Another civil war erupted, with generals contending for the throne. Septimius Severus, commander of the Danube legions, emerged victorious, founding the Severan dynasty. He purged opponents, famously telling his sons to enrich the soldiers and scorn everyone else. This advice reflected the new reality. The emperor's power rested on military support, and keeping the legions loyal with pay and donatives was paramount. Septimius campaigned in the east and north, dying in 211 CE in York in Britain. His sons, Caracalla and Geta, succeeded jointly, but immediately quarreled. Caracalla murdered Geta in his mother's arms, then had thousands of Geta's supporters killed. Caracalla is remembered for extending Roman citizenship to all free inhabitants of the empire in 212 CE with the Constitutio Antonina. This sounds progressive, but was primarily a revenue measure, as citizens paid higher taxes. He campaigned against Parthia, but was assassinated by a soldier in 217 CE.
The Severan dynasty continued with increasingly bizarre emperors. Elagabalus, a teenage priest of a Syrian sun god, scandalized Rome with his religious practices, eccentric behavior, and sexual exploits from 218 to 222 CE. His cousin Alexander Severus attempted to rule more traditionally, but was murdered by his own troops in 335 CE. Alexander Severus's death marked the beginning of the crisis of the 3rd century, 50 years of near-continuous civil war, economic collapse, and foreign invasions that nearly destroyed the empire. From 235 to 284 CE, at least 50 men claimed the imperial title. Most were military commanders, proclaimed emperor by their legions. Most died violently within months or a few years. This is sometimes called the period of the barracks emperors, as armies made and unmade emperors at will. The empire faced attacks on all frontiers. Germanic tribes crossed the Rhine and Danube, raiding deep into the empire. The Goths sacked Athens and other Greek cities. The Sassanid Persian Empire, which had replaced the Parthians, invaded the eastern provinces. In 260 CE, Emperor Valerian was captured by the Persian king Shapur I, the only Roman emperor ever taken prisoner by a foreign enemy. Valerian died in captivity, and according to one story, his skin was stuffed and displayed as a trophy. The empire briefly fragmented. In the east, the city of Palmyra, under Queen Zenobia, established control over Syria, Egypt, and parts of Asia Minor. In the west, a Gallic empire seceded, controlling Gaul, Britain, and Spain. The economy collapsed. Silver content of coins was debased as emperors tried to pay their armies. Hyperinflation resulted. Trade disrupted.